Dun, 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 dun. Welcome to Mastering Thought. I'm
Here
here
we
with
are
Mark.
again.
uh, and yeah, it's been really fun talking with you, Mark, about just what things can prevent us from seeing what's happening to ourselves. And I think you put together a really good episode today, so I'm excited for everybody else to be able to see it.
Oh, well, I am too. It's when you get to the bottom of the barrel here, it gets a little discouraging. So the awakening is really, really important. But the title
The
today is
awakening to
the
the thought watching.
yeah, and we're not going
Mm-hmm.
to talk about that today, but we're going to reference it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole bunch of videos on our channel that refer to these things, and so we'll put some end cards at the end to give people more detail.
Cool.
But basically, there are three layers of systemic destructive dynamics that take place subconsciously in relationships. And and when I lay this out to people, their eyes get big because it's really spooky.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's very real.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm excited you put these. I'm kind of thinking of today as like a sampler platter. When you go to a restaurant, you get the appetizer sampler. And I feel like this is that. Like we're visiting each of these topics just enough to like help make a connection. And
Right.
then like with the longer videos, if someone wanted to watch one of those, and that's such a neat setup. So let's get into it. What you
So
got
there
for
are
us,
three
Mark?
layers, and they go deeper. So there's layer number one. It's kind of on the surface. Layer number
Mm-hmm.
two, and then layer number three is at the bottom. But all
Mm-hmm.
three of these are operational in a marriage. And the first layer is the dance of the lion and the unicorn. And here's what it looks like. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
these big circles are the limbic system, and we've got lots of information on the
Mm-hmm.
channel on the limbic system.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are basically two kind of people, two circles, two people. The one on the right I call the lion, and the one on the left I call the unicorn. And we all have emotional pain, and so the lion's emotional pain is a feeling of being rejected, like nobody cares or they're not good enough.
Right.
And so everybody needs a defense against the pain. So lions defend that feeling of rejection with anger, with open anger. Now, unicorn's pain
Mm-hmm.
is fear or anxiety. And when they feel
Mm-hmm.
that fear or anxiety, they defend against that by avoiding. And of course,
Right.
when they avoid, it looks like nobody cares. And it just goes around and around like that.
Right.
And this is what I call the dance of the lion and the unicorn. And you can see this gets really destructive because, here, let me show it to you a different way. I don't know if you've ever seen this particular diagram or not, have
I
you?
think so. Not in these colors, maybe, but I think I have. I don't
So,
know. If you've seen this diagram before, put it in the comments.
so notice in the middle here, these black letters, that is the cognitive model that I use.
So this
Perception,
is what's going on in your brain.
this is the way your brain processes the dance of the lion and the unicorn. So
Yeah.
perception triggers feelings, which drives defensive behavior, which has a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the top, this up here, this line here, is the lion, and this is the unicorn. And so the lion's perception is rejection. Okay, now what's a perception? So let's say I send you a text
Mm-hmm.
and you don't respond to me for 4 hours, because a truck ran over your toe and you're in the emergency room. Okay, but if I'm a lion, I'm going to interpret that as rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling, that hurt feeling, the painful feeling, is a feeling that you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's going to happen is I'm likely to get angry. Well, I sent
Mm-hmm.
her a text. How come she's not responding to me? Blah, blah, blah. And that is a dialogue that goes on in everybody's head.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the goal, what I'm trying to accomplish here is get your approval.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a dynamic I see in every single relationship, 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So down
Wow.
here, the unicorn, their perception is conflict. They hate conflict. Everything looks like conflict. And so when they think that when they have this perception that there's going to be conflict, they feel fear. And in order to get away from the fear and the conflict, they avoid.
Mm-hmm.
And a unicorn's goal is almost always safety. They're trying to get safe. Now, notice how anger looks like conflict and avoidance look like rejection.
Right.
And we're right back to the circles we saw here.
Yeah.
Now, I'm telling you, this cycle is very destructive, extremely destructive. And
Right.
it's determined by whether you're a lion or a unicorn. And lions and unicorns are born that way. And then whatever
Right.
happens in the first 5 years affects the trajectory of how big of a lion or big of a unicorn they are.
Mm-hmm.
But there's
Mm-hmm.
also something important here I want to point out, and that is over here. If you want to understand your partner and you know whether they're a lion or a unicorn, then you've got the key right here. So
Mm-hmm.
everything a lion is doing in a relationship is to try to get approval.
Mm-hmm.
And everything a unicorn is doing is motivated by wanting to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that explains pretty much everything that they're doing.
I'm just imagining light bulbs going off for other people like they did for me the first time.
You know,
Like,
it's
ooh.
it's really an amazing experience for me because when I show people this diagram, it's jaw
Mm.
dropping.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Oh
they
yeah.
know something is going on, but when they see this, they just go, "Oh my God, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I've been looking for. There it is."
Mm-hmm. So interesting.
But you can see that in this cycle that the lion, when they don't get what they want, they will get more and more aggressive and angry,
Mm-hmm.
which makes the problem worse. And it
Right.
also makes the unicorn become more and more avoidant, which in turn makes the problem worse. And eventually, this cycle will destroy many relationships
Mm-hmm.
because the
Mm.
pain becomes so great, they just want to get away from the pain. So, what better way to get away from the pain than
Get away
swap
from the
one person
relationship.
for another,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work because you take the issue to the next relationship.
Yeah, you just look for the next person you can have the same problem with.
That's right.
Just
That's exactly.
spoiler alert.
Well, and we all know people who've been married and divorced 2 or 3 times, and the
Yeah.
pattern in the next relationship, nauseatingly repeats the pattern in the previous relationship, and it just
Yeah.
goes on and on.
And they say, if you're the one in all these different relationships with problems, like maybe there's something to look at about yourself.
I never
So
forget
this could be
that
that.
20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, I had a client, and he comes in, he's a unicorn, super unicorn. He was such a unicorn and so suspicious and wary that he didn't even want to sign the informed consent form.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah,
He's all,
spooky.
can I avoid this?
Yeah, exactly. And so he tells me, his girlfriend is psychotically crazy angry. His ex-wife was angry. His mother was just a terror. She was angry. And he says, "What is wrong with all these women?" and and I said, "Well, there is a common element here." He says, "What's that?" And I said, "You." And it went
Yeah.
right over his head.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's layer one.
Yeah.
All right. Layer
I'm excited
two.
for layer two.
All right. Layer two is what I call disowned parts.
Also known as shadow stuff, right?
Yep.
Shadow work.
So a disowned part is a part of our character or personality that we have been taught or concluded is unacceptable. Or another term for it is our shadow self, or our
I
shadow
kind of wanted
parts.
you to whisper that. Our shadow. Um,
So
so
go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, this is, I'll just say it after because I want you to be able to show more first.
Okay. So this is how this works. We're back to the lion and the unicorn. So, what does the unicorn never want to see about themselves? They never want to see
That
their
they're
anger.
angry. Ah.
So, what they do is they project their anger onto their lion partner and then they attack them for being too angry. And trust me, this happens in almost every case. As a matter of fact, I had a unicorn man just last week who was watching our video. You remember the video that you and I did on passive aggressive
Passive
behavior?
aggression. Yeah.
And he suddenly
Yeah.
realized in the middle of that, and this is like a 45-year-old man.
Mm-hmm.
He suddenly realized in the middle of watching that video that he had been angry for years and he didn't know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what he had been doing was he was projecting his anger onto his wife and then criticizing her for being too angry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then what lions do, and just think about the metaphor of the lion. You know, we think as lions are powerful and creative, courageous.
Mm-hmm.
They're certainly not weak and vulnerable, are they?
Not the cowardly lion from the Wizard of Oz.
Right.
Yeah, but they are.
I think that was Bert Lahr who played that role. That was before your
Oh,
time, probably.
I don't know Bert Lahr.
So, lions do not want to admit that they have weakness and vulnerability. So, what they do is they project this onto their unicorn partners and then they attack them for being weak and vulnerable. Now, why is this the case? Because if you go back to this, maybe it's easier to see here, the unicorn is acting out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go here, that fear looks like weakness. But it's not, because if you really study the lion unicorn model of relationships, you'll realize that the unicorn is the more powerful of the two.
Right,
And
because
you,
it
because
always
go
comes
ahead.
back to the approval. Yeah.
Right. And so what's happening is the lion is trying to get the emotional connection in the relationship, which means approval, and the unicorn withholds that connection. And so because they're controlling the emotional connection, they actually have more leverage in the relationship than the lions do. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
seem that way from the outside, but they do.
Right. Right.
And this is very common. This is not some esoteric thing. Over and over, and this is particularly the case with females who are lions. They marry these
Ooh,
passive
ooh.
men. They marry these passive men, and then they look at them through the lens of that passivity is weak and vulnerable, and the passivity is not weak and vulnerable. Passivity is extremely powerful,
Mm-hmm.
but their
Right.
lens lets them see it as weakness and vulnerability, and they just hate it because when they were little kids, they were taught that they could never show weakness and vulnerability if they were going to get the approval they wanted to get.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so you find these very powerful, dynamic, independent women married to passive men who are disgusted by their passivity and their passive aggressive behavior and their irresponsibility, and they don't understand it's actually a dynamic they're setting up themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
because
you
of
you had said, oh, go ahead.
no, you finish your thought.
Well, I'm gonna kind of talk about a little bit of a different thing.
Well, what I was gonna say is that if I have to be the responsible one in the relationship, what do you have to be?
Uh, I don't, well, I'm just cheating, but the safe one? I don't know.
No, well, no, if I have to be the responsible one, you have to be the irresponsible one.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so if I've carved out that
Right.
territory, then the only territory left is for you to be irresponsible, which you're not actually
Got it.
being irresponsible, you're being passive aggressive because I need to be the boss. And so it sets up
Mm-hmm.
this
And
whole
you don't want a
dynamic.
boss. Yeah, yeah.
No, it's very destructive.
Yeah.
And of course the
Well, the thing I
go
was, oh, go ahead.
go
And of
ahead.
course, well, I'm kind of talking about a different thing. I just didn't know you're going to add one more thought.
Well, uh, of course, what's happening the whole time that the unicorn is being dominated by the lion, they're becoming more and more resentful and more passive aggressive, and there are more and more passive attacks in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you go.
Mm. Well, I was going to say you'd pointed out one time, and I really loved this, but it was something like if you meet someone who you absolutely adore or dislike, or like something about someone that you absolutely adore or dislike, it's probably you recognizing that that thing matters to you and that you have those traits or want, like, those are important to you.
Right. So when you meet somebody and you don't like something about them, it's usually your disowned part that you're projecting onto them that you don't want to see about
Right.
yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So
And I thought that was a really good way, like a good litmus to seeing your own shadow pretty easily.
that's right. If you don't like something about somebody else, it's your shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, we're so glad you guys are here. If you've been enjoying our video or other videos, please like and subscribe. It means a lot to us. And that way you don't have to miss our new content when it comes out. Share with a friend too.
and also, and I'm desperately trying to search for a slide here. Let me see if it's over here. Yeah. Uh, we realize
Listeners.
we realize that people want more oftentimes than they can get in a video.
Mm-hmm.
And so Christina and I are in the process right now of setting up an online community
Mm-hmm.
called Thought Masters. And if you would be interested in joining that community, being one of the founders of it, we're going to be setting that up here in a few weeks. And just scan this QR code and click the little checkbox on the form that comes up for the founders launch, and we'll put you on the list, and you can be notified as soon as we open up the site to the founders level, and we're really excited about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, are we ready for the third layer here?
Ready for the third layer.
And so The third layer is even, in some ways is really insidious because it contradicts the first layer. And that is recruiting the parent.
Mm-hmm.
So we choose partners who can play the role of the parent that we had the issue with when we were children. And then we subconsciously recruit them to fit our narrative so we can struggle to solve the problem we brought with us from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're a lion and you've got this unicorn partner and you're upset because, they're passive aggressive and they're not connecting with you emotionally. At some level, that plays right into your plan because that is the struggle that you brought with you to the relationship,
Yeah.
and you have recruited them to play that role. And I'll show you how that works here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Are we ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so let's look at the tortured little world of the lion. So here's our lion in his tortured little world. Or it could be her tortured little world. Doesn't matter. Okay, so you can see arrows in the diagram, right?
Yeah.
The arrows are important. So what is the lion moving away from? So you can see the arrow behind him. So what is the lion moving away from? I know you know the answer, so.
I know the answer. I'm giving time for other people to guess. Do you know what the lion is moving away from?
Well, let's look at this diagram. We can see right away what they're moving away from.
Nobody cares.
No,
Rejection.
they're moving away from rejection. There it is
Mm-hmm.
right there. So,
Mm-hmm.
so the lion is moving away from perceived rejection. Now, this is really strange because what it means is in order for the lion to move forward, they have to see rejection. Seeing rejection is the
Right?
motivating force. This is not good.
Right.
So now the question becomes, what are they moving toward?
Acceptance.
Exactly. So if you go back here, you can see that their goal is approval or acceptance. So the lion is moving toward acceptance. So the lion lives in this tortured little world where they have to perceive rejection in order to move toward acceptance. Now, the irony of this tortured little world is they never get the acceptance. And in order to be motivated to move toward acceptance, they have to see rejection, which means they have to be with a partner they perceive as rejecting them.
Mm. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Do you think that really the lion first needs to accept themselves, or is this a thing no matter what, if a lion accepts themselves or not?
I don't believe the lion can accept themselves until they resolve this issue.
The the dance issue or just the non-conscious pattern just playing out non-consciously?
I think that's the better of the two. They have to. You can't accept yourself if you're still unconscious.
Sure. Yeah. Because
So
it's just kind of a, yeah, it's not going to be as meaningful because you don't really know yourself.
that yeah, it's not going to work. And so all this pablum
Yeah.
that you get in therapy about loving yourself and accepting yourself and being your own advocate and all this, none of that works. Why doesn't it work? Because subconsciously you've still got this other agenda going on. And as long as this is survival. This is the limbic system.
Yeah.
This is our instinct as animals, is to survive perceived rejection, or we'll get to the unicorn in a minute. And as
Mm-hmm.
long as that's programmed into us and it's running our lives, we can go to the feel good workshop every weekend and it's still not going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, when this gets resolved, the accepting yourself is automatic. It's been there all along. You've just been busy doing this other thing.
Right. Right.
And so, when you go to therapy, you hear a lot of stuff like you need boundaries and you need self-care and you need to love yourself and I hear this stuff and I'm saying, okay, well, what are you doing instead? Do you know what you're doing instead? Well, if you don't know what you're doing instead, you can try to love yourself all you want. you know you're just like Stuart Smalley. I'm good enough and I'm smart enough and by golly, people like me.
People like me.
you know but deep down inside, I've been emotionally programmed to expect to be rejected, and I'm totally unaware of that. Okay, well, none of that positive stuff is going to work until that gets addressed. And
Right.
it gets addressed, as you know, through self-awareness.
Yeah.
But if you're not aware that you have issues around rejection or feeling threatened, um, you're not going to be able to overcome anything.
Right. Yeah. And we have lots of videos about that, but if that's you and you're in that camp, you can do the thought watching exercise that we have.
Right.
And that is a very short, easy, technically way to wake up.
And if you go to our playlist about mastering thought and awakening, all of those address that in one form or another.
Yeah, that's so cool you put those collections together.
So, what is the unicorn moving away from then?
Danger, danger.
Exactly. The unicorn is moving away from a perceived threat. So, what does that mean? Well, that means that unicorns are programmed to see their partners as a threat. Remember back here, they don't like conflict. Their perception is there's conflict, and so they're constantly trying to move away from the danger of that conflict. Now, this may be hard to understand because maybe your partner is 6'4" and 230 pounds, male who drives a truck with one hand and a bulldozer with the other. And how can this possibly be somebody who's afraid or thinks there's danger? And without exception, when I've had that person in the room and I have exposed this, they'll sit there and nod their head. They know they're upset. They're fearful. They freely admit it. It's really
Mm-hmm.
strange. Their partner's like, this five
You?
foot 2 inch woman looking at them thinking, what? You
Mm-hmm.
got to be kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what is the unicorn moving toward? You said it already.
Safety.
Safety. So if we look back here, you can see the goal of a unicorn is safety. And so that's what they're always moving toward, is safety. That's their goal. Okay, well, in order to be motivated to move toward safety, they have to see something as dangerous or threatening or something making them very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're doing is they're setting their partner up to be the person who's activating that sense of danger or threat. And that's why they married that person.
Um,
Because their roadmap, their definition of a relationship is I have to try to get love from somebody who could get out of control at any point.
Interesting.
And
And so, like, the more of a lion you are, or the more unaware you are, the more of a the more you're going to look for an extreme unicorn
that's
or
correct.
opposite.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
That's absolutely, totally 100% true. So If on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're a unicorn at a level 8, you're going to go find a lion who's at level 8.
Hmm.
And this is
And
going to be,
if one of you starts getting better, but the other one doesn't, do you think that would cause a problem with their relationship or their connection?
uh, not
If
necessarily.
if they're not awake, I guess I mean, because I
So
know
if
being
let's
awake kind of changes everything.
that's the point I was going to make. Exactly what you just said. So when one
Hmm.
person wakes up, the whole dynamics in the relationship changes.
Right.
And so at that point you might be completely okay. You love this person, you totally accept them exactly where they are, and you want to continue the relationship because that's your life and you're okay with that. So I get this question all the time. Well, don't we both need to be in therapy? No, you don't. You can transform your life. And
Hmm.
since, and see, look at this, since the relationship is a system, when you change any part of a system, the whole system
The
changes.
whole system changes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, no,
Yeah.
you cannot wait to take responsibility for your unresolved issues for the other person to get involved. You need to start working on it now and that also opens the door for the other person to look around and say, wait a minute, something's changed here. Maybe it's time for me to look at myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so encouraging to watch your partner do something like good for themselves or for your
Mm-hmm.
relationship. I know for me, it makes me have more gas in my tank when it's like my turn to take action.
Yeah. And when you know the other person is still deep in their own stuff, there's a level of compassion that comes that really helps you control your own reactivity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's so well put. Yeah. So the ability to not take my partner's um, type personally was
Mm-hmm.
such a huge benefit to me
Right.
and us. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you really digest what we talked about today, you realize that we set this whole thing up. There's nobody to blame but
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. We brought
Yeah.
this agenda. Even in relationships where there's domestic violence, there's always something for the victim to be able to see about themselves that prompted them to open the door for this kind of a relationship.
Right.
We do women a very big disservice by allowing them to just assume they're victims and not see that there may be some underlying agenda that left them vulnerable to this kind of a
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. I read this book called like Masters of Emotional Blackmail or something like that. And it was just kind of explaining what a manipulator does. But, they had a pretty good chunk of a chapter towards the end that said, like, you have to participate to be a victim. There
That's
is
right.
no such thing as a victim who isn't accepting the role.
Well, if you're in a
And if
relationship
you
with a
don't
manipulator, go ahead.
if you don't care about whatever they're trying to threaten or control you with, then you can't be a victim.
So,
So
I mean, if you're truly a victim of domestic violence, I mean, that's a safety issue. You got to get out of there. You
that's
got to
true.
get.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're being abused and manipulated, at some level, there's something for you to learn about yourself as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the internet is full of people who, and most of them are women, and most of them are lions who have been in relationships that were, very difficult, but they have not learned anything about themselves in the process, and they're just setting themselves up for another relationship of the same kind without. I get this question all the time: should I stay or should I leave? My answer is: have you learned what you're supposed to learn? Because the purpose of a relationship is to make you conscious, not happy.
Mm.
And so the thing that keeps coming up over and over and over is something about yourself you need to look at, and that's pretty uncomfortable truth for most people.
Yeah. I had this imaginary image of someone handing me or like someone a anniversary card and say on the front like you make me so conscious. Happy anniversary. I love you.
Oh, that sounds angry.
uh, you make me so conscious.
All right.
That's such a good statement though. There's so much there's so much to that. I'm gonna chew on that for the rest of the weekend. I like that.
So let me just give you an example. Let's say a couple comes to me and she's beautiful, she reads her Bible, she loves Jesus, and everybody thinks she's a good person. He's a drunk and a womanizer and can't hold a job and he's violent. Okay, so who needs therapy?
Yes. Well,
So
both, but I know you're probably going to say the woman because she's the
no.
one who's sticking with the guy. What? Who?
Well, they
Who needs?
both need therapy. He knows
Yeah,
he needs therapy, but but if I let her slip through my fingers without giving her the opportunity to see what her stake is in this kind of a relationship, I'm not
yeah,
doing my job.
yeah.
I've
Well,
failed
and
her.
kind of going back to part two, the disowned parts, right? She's got some disowned parts.
Yeah.
She's finding her flaws and saying they're only his.
So if you can find a good therapist and stay in a relationship another month or two, you might learn something that transforms your life. Now, if you're not safe, you need to get out. You need a safety plan. That's different.
Got it. Yeah, yeah.
All right. So lions need a partner they can see as rejecting them, and so they go out and marry one.
Hmm.
If you went to a singles function, you would pick out the person who would be the most rejecting
Mm,
without understanding, without knowing you'd done that. Unicorns need a partner they can see as threatening.
hmm.
And so they'll pick, out of the five people that are standing there, they'll pick the one who will be the most threatening, the most angry, the most, whatever. And that's how we pick our
Or at
partners
their level. At their
at their
level.
at their level. That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. So we
Okay.
have this unconscious agenda to play this out in our marriages. And so we pick partners that can play the role of the parent so we can act this whole thing out. And it's really when, if you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, these truths can be very discouraging. Don't let that happen. Stay in touch with us. Scan the QR code. Ask us
Hmm.
questions. Put them in the
Yeah.
comments. We don't want you to be left in the darkness.
So here's what we learned today. I love
So
these
there's
kinds of recaps.
there's three levels that are going on, these hidden agendas in relationships. First is the dance of the lion and unicorn. We're invariably involved in our opposite type.
Hmm. And the dance is the most surface level. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's the most obvious level usually.
Hmm.
The next level down is
Yeah.
disowned parts, where we're objecting to the behavior of the other person because it's a part of ourselves we don't want to see. And finally is the whole issue of struggle to solve the problem. So the reason I married Mary was because she reminds me of my mother, and I want to resolve the issue of how do I get in a relationship and get love from somebody who's not safe to be with. And that creates a lot of difficulty.
Hmm.
Now, most of what we talked about here today is in my book, The Dance of the Lion and Unicorn, which is also an Audible book. It's doing pretty well.
Nice.
And if you want to go in more depth and get some support, please reach out to us and consider being a founding member of our Thought Masters online community. And let us know if we can help in any way. We don't, you know, we're not doing this by remote control. If you have a question or need something, put it in the comments or scan this QR code. It will take you to a form that will allow us to know you want something, and we'll respond. So
good.
questions, comments, Christina? What'd you think?
Uh, I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great whenever we can become more aware of whatever could be dragging our lives down
Mm-hmm.
personally. So I loved it. What about you? What do you think? How has it been for you having known this stuff and then taking a look, putting it all together?
Um, this is something I've presented to my clients over the years,
Mm-hmm.
but the topic was forced me to put it all together in a program, and so that was kind of
Mm-hmm.
cool for me.
Mm-hmm.
But enough about me. I'd like to hear you talk about me. So,
Well, I told you you weren't going to disappoint me, and you didn't. So, and I wasn't saying that in a scary lion way either.
in case you're listening, you wonder, both Christina and I are lions. So,
Okay, I was thinking during this show, maybe we should make shirts that either have a lion or a unicorn on it, and it says, I was born this way.
and nobody would understand what we're doing or why we're doing
Yeah, but
it,
if you saw someone wearing it, you'd be like, Thought Masters.
but
I'm in.
that's what we need. Is we need thought
Yeah.
masters on one side and a lion and a unicorn on the other.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I might wear it if it was cool looking. Big white tee with a cool graphic on the front. Anyway.
All right, everybody. We're glad you tuned in today. We're going to go start working on the next episode. So please like and subscribe. And, because we do this for you, we really want to have an impact on your lives in a positive way.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, we'll see you next time.
Okay, everybody. Bye bye.